Well, this is a Q tour I've been looking forward to for some time. We have Matthew Curcio, and Matt, you're going to have to correct me on the pronunciation of your last name. But I met Matthew several years ago at Oshkosh. I was hanging around my aircraft, and this young guy comes up, and he was telling me that he had just gotten a Q-200. He's living in Ohio as an engineer, and he was interested in learning more about the aircraft. And then at the same time we were there, this is going on, he said he was going to be talking to somebody from Scaled Composites. And I thought, that sounds great. Young guy talking to a company that Rutan founded, and looks like, wish him the best luck, and on he goes. So turns out a couple of years later, he got the big job, and the airplane's flying great, and just terrific. So it's okay. So having said all that, Matthew made a great sacrifice for us this morning, because his home airport is John Wayne Airport in California. Is really noisy, and he knew that we wouldn't be able to conduct this very well. So he got up really early this morning and hopped in his Quickie and flew over to some other airport. I don't know where you are, Matt. And you can just go ahead and take it away from here.
So yeah, kind of going from Sam's cheat sheet, the questions talking about me. So he already kind of gave the quick intro. I'm from Toledo, Ohio. So that's where I learned to fly at a little airport called Toledo Executive in a Pedenpole air camper. And I was building the Aventura. It's a little two-seat sea flying boat, amphibious flying boat. So that's kind of like what originally pushed me into getting my pilot's license and getting into aviation and all that. As Sam kind of said, I ended up at Oshkosh with that seaplane, and was going, and kind of realized I was going to be moving out to California pretty soon. And without going into too much detail, I was kind of already planning on moving to California before I got the job at Scaled, and it just really worked out awesome that I that kind of all wrapped into one. So yeah, I had already bought the Quickie because I knew I was going to be, heading out there, and the seaplane was going to be a, not great airplane for Southern California. And so when I met Sam at Oshkosh, I was kind of in the mode of getting that airplane ready to fly. I had done a bunch of work on it. I'll talk about, the door just swung closed. We'll talk about the airplane a little more. I think I'm going to kind of roll through Sam's questions here. So it's where I'm from. So yeah, the aircraft's a Q-200, and I bought it. I bought the airplane from a guy who goes by the name of Stubby, and he didn't build it, but he had kind of currently owned it. And there was this guy, Stubby, whose real name's Philip. Him and this other guy, what was that guy's name? Denny Thomas. Denny Thomas was the one that built this airplane. And so he had flown it for like 250 hours, and then it sat for, I think, 10, 15 years before I got it. And so when I got it, it was kind of like, let's go through, inspect this airplane and get it back into a flying state. So that's what I did. And then kind of, as Sam said, when I met him at Oshkosh, the airplane was like pretty much cleaned up, all ready to go. The only thing to do was to go out and for me to fly it. As far as kind of going back to the airplane a little bit here, and we'll obviously go and show and tell the airplane, but my understanding was that Denny and Philip, they built the two airplanes in a hangar in Ohio, and it was over the course of about 2 years. So they were pushing pretty hard, and they both flew the airplanes. I think my airplane flew about 250 hours before it started sitting, and Philip Stubby, he flew like 600 or 700 hours. And the airplane's mostly just sat in a hangar in Ohio for a really long time. And kind of cool story. There's another guy who's on the queue list I don't think he's on this call, but his name is Sean Milkey, and he owns the sister ship to mine, and actually bought it from Ohio and flew it up to Anchorage, Alaska. And when I was in Alaska, we snapped a little picture of our two airplanes together. So yeah, as far as how I decided to pick up the Quickie, I always, well, not always. When I got into aviation, I kind of became a bit enthralled with the routine designs, and so the long, easy, the Quickie. Mostly I just thought the Quickie was a super cool design, and I liked the like optimization for simple systems and efficiency, and the opportunity to go fast and far. So that's kind of what got me into the airplane. As far as how I learned to fly it, I pretty much just went up flying in a Thorpe a little bit and got some time in a quick tailwheel airplane. And then I went up and flew this airplane. So I didn't really do a super thorough transition, but it worked out fine. Yeah, that's kind of probably enough about me and the airplane. Sam, do you think, should I go and switch to showing the airplane?
Well, just before we do that, I'd like
Any more questions?
why don't you tell us a little bit what you do with Scaled?
Yeah. So I'm actually not at Scaled anymore. So when I moved out here, I started working at Scale, and I started working on the Strata launch program. So pretty quickly over there, I started working on the flight controls of the Strata launch carrier aircraft, really big airplane. So I worked on that for about a year and a half, and then we flew. So I got to monitor those systems from the control room during the first flight. So I've actually never seen the airplane fly. We've flown 3 times now. I've been in the control room for all those. And then about 2 years from when I moved out and joined with Scaled, Paul Allen, who was the funder, the kind of founder, he wasn't the founder of Strata Launch, and he provided all the funding. Basically, he died. And so the company ended up transitioning ownership to a private investment firm in New York, and they formed a new entity, Strata Launch. So a lot of the Scaled folks that were working on the airplane moved over to Strata Launch, and it was an interesting transition because sorry, I'll get that door when we switch to the airplane, but it was an interesting transition because typically you go to you go to a new job and you don't know anybody or anything about what you're doing. In this case, we went to a new job and we all knew everybody and we all knew exactly what we were doing. And the people that owned the company were asking us who we were and what we needed to do with all their money, So it's been a really fun experience. I've learned a ton working out there. We've flown the airplane, the big Strata launch carrier aircraft 3 times now, and we're looking to fly it quite a bit more this year. So I've been working on, like I said, I've been working on the flight controls of the aircraft the whole time there. And then I've kind of started to transition to other systems on the airplane as well. And then as far as what our company's doing, we're also developing it's a rocket-powered hypersonic vehicle that'll be used for testing. So we'll drop that from the Strata launch carrier aircraft, go up to about 120,000 feet and fly at Mach 5 for about a minute, and then return autonomously to Mojave and recover what other airborne test equipment our customers want. So yeah, that's what I've been doing for work, and it's afforded me great opportunity to live in Southern California, enjoy the really awesome weather and, locations that we get to fly to out here. There's so many cool areas to fly to in Southern California, and the weather's almost always perfect VFR. And so, yeah, even I think in the first couple of years I worked there, I was living a little closer to work and I would fly my airplane. It was like a 30-minute drive or 10-minute flight. And so I'd fly my airplane over pretty much every day. I think there was a 6-month period where I flew into work every single day and didn't drive once. Of course, our offices are attached to the hangar at work, so I can just park my airplane right out front. And so now I'm actually living down in Orange County, as Sam said, right near John Wayne Airport. So I typically fly up to our office once or twice a week and park the airplane out in front of the carrier aircraft hangar. So it's kind of a cool opportunity I get to be able to, really use the airplane for commuting. Any other questions about, that subject, Sam, or?
I think that's pretty good. We could go on for quite a while, but let's take a look at your airplane.
Let me go get this door secured. We'll have to edit this part out, Sam.
What airport are you at?
Yeah, so while we're doing that, I can talk about that. So, like I said,
the aircraft stays during the weekend at John Wayne Airport. And then obviously Mojave is where I'm at during the week if I'm up at work. And then I'm at a little airport called Fullerton, which is just like maybe 30 miles north of John Wayne. So yeah, John Wayne Airport has a lot of jet traffic, 737s nonstop. So it would be totally disruptive to try and do this there. So anyways, let me switch the video around. Okay, so here's the bird. There's an RV-8 next to me here in this hangar, but hope everybody can see this. So yeah, pretty I guess pretty close to not too many like crazy modifications or anything, but Q-200. So got a O200 engine up front. As far as the engine goes, it's got when I overhauled the engine about a year and a half ago, Lycon gate. I had Lycon port and polish the cylinders, use their high compression pistons, and then I put Klaus Savier's light speed ignition system on. So probably some of you are familiar with Klaus's hardware. So he's located in an airport called Santa Paula, not too far from here. So actually picked him up, by hand from Klaus, which is kind of fun. He's a really awesome guy. So anyways, yeah, the engines, I think that's kind of most of the details. Still carbureted. Do have a little bit of ram air, kind of designed like a ram duct into there. And then right now it's just got a turboprop. So like I said, I use the airplane for commuting. And but I also kind of use it up for these big trips. So I flew this to this is almost 2 years ago now. I flew up to this airplane up to Alaska. So it was like a 1 day to go from Mojave to Seattle, and then a day to go from Seattle to Whitehorse, Yukon Territory, up to Anchorage, and I eventually flew it all the way up to Barrow, up way up in the Arctic Circle. So that was kind of like the biggest trip I did, and then I also did like a 48 state trip. So I guess what I'm saying is, this is a flying airplane. It's not a hangar queen. I try to keep it not looking too terrible, but the things I'm most worried about are performance, reliability, and comfort for me, because I do fly it, several times a week. So
how many, Matthew, how many hours have you put on it since you've owned it?
About 1,400.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And that's in how many years? When did you get it?
I got it in 2017, and I made like my first flight in August of 2017.
Okay.
So yeah, the most I've flown it in a year. I mean, the most I've flown in a year was like, I think 560 hours. And that was the year that I did like so I did like, I flew it to Alaska, and then when I got back, I flew, I did like a 5-day trip where I made a stop in each of the lower 48 states. So that year I put a ton of time on it. So yeah, and then unfortunately at the end of that trip, at the end of the 48 state trip, I flew back to California. I was back for a couple weeks, and I flew out to Oshkosh, and yeah, Sam, you guys were all there. We talked, and then on the way back from Oshkosh, my canopy latch came undone while I was taxiing, and I reached up to grab the canopy, and it was a fairly narrow taxiway, and one of the, like, in the process of that, the right main went off the taxiway, and the aircraft sort of ground looped it around and ended up on its nose and damaged the prop and all that. So that was kind of what precipitated the engine overhaul, but it was getting to be time anyways. So what I was saying was, right now I've got a turboprop. The long term, the plan, which I'd like to get to here, I just haven't had the time in the last couple of years, is to reshape the cowling a little bit, go to plenum cooling, and then put one of Carcato's props on there. So that's kind of power plant stuff. Anybody, if anybody's got questions regarding that, throw it at me. This is the shoot, I can't remember the airfoil. It's not the it's the airfoil that's got the spar. You guys know that. So I did kind of reshape the wheel pants a little bit in the spring, or about a year ago now. So they've got like this, there's almost no tires exposed there, but it picked up about 10 miles an hour or so, somewhere around there.
10. Just from the wheel pants, 10?
That might be a little optimistic. It might have been somewhere between 5 and 10. It's hard to tell because it's so dependent on wind. And I don't do, when I first got into like modifying, like trying to clean things up, I was like, I'm going to spend all this time characterizing the airplane. But I found that it's just like I would delay doing modifications because I hadn't characterized things. And ultimately I just wanted to do the modifications. So I don't keep super good track of stuff. But yeah, these wheel fans are sort of cool. They come off with piano hinges. So you pull this one out and there's one back here and it drops off. So it allows me to, like, you know, if I need to, obviously whenever I need to change tires, I can just, you know, jack the wing up, drop the wheel pins off in 2 seconds. And it really doesn't add any additional work for servicing the tires and brakes.
Now, I know on some of your big trips, you've been flying into some, I think, gravel airports. So you wouldn't.
Yeah. So I would definitely take these off if I was going into any gravel. Yeah, the first like few years I had the airplane, I would fly into Salton Sea to go, you know, like down to Glamis and stuff with my friends quite a bit. And so that was a dirt strip. And so I've got a lot of time on dirt strips. And then when I flew up to Alaska, yeah, Sam, there was, I flew out of Lake Hood, obviously not the lake, but the gravel strip there. And then, so that was kind of a cool one to get to fly out of. Actually, yeah, without belaboring that too much, but that was actually a really fun experience because you fly into Anchorage and clear customs. And then I did, the winds were really bad. Like it was the biggest crossings I've ever had to land with there. And so I ended up taxiing across the street to get to Lake Hood and took off the gravel runway there. And it's like a progressive taxi over the roads. And you like click the buttons on a specific frequency to open these gates that go across the road. So anyways, side story, but yeah, so anyways, as you're saying, yeah, these would definitely not be suitable for gravel. And same thing with the tail wheel. I've got like it pretty well fared in. We talked about wheel pants a little bit. Definitely not you know, suitable for rough fields. Yeah, I don't know. We don't need to talk a whole lot about the airframe. It's pretty basic. It does have the air brake reflex, and I think it's got all the 6-pack modifications actually. So yeah, and then this is the interior of the plane. So these seat cushions just kind of pop forward, and then you know, obviously the traditional baggage back here. And I did take the time to make like enclosures for all my controls, you know, prevent jams and such, because I fly with baggage quite a bit.
Yeah. Now, Matt, we're starting to get a lot of questions about your cruise speed and range and things like that. But I know that this is not the setup that you use for your long term. Can you talk about what goes on the right side while you're
for sure? Yeah.
Flights?
Yeah. So as far as cruise speed, I pretty much like, I always plan on 175 miles per hour. Usually I can do 180, 185. And then depending on altitude, I'd be burning anywhere from, you know, 5.5 to like just under 5 gallons an hour there. And that's it, you know, that's long term, like that's in cruise, not in the climb. You end up burning a lot more fuel in the climb, as the case with any airplane. I'll get to the fuel real quick here. So I've got the typical setup with the, you know, 4.5 or so gallon header tank. And then it's right just like 14.9, 15 gallons down here. I do have some, you know, modifications of the fuel system I can talk about in a little bit. But as far as what you're saying, Sam, so I also have a passenger aux tank that I connect, and it's about 23 gallons, and it sits in the passenger seat here, kind of follows like this profile down here, and it just like actually uses the seat belt to buckle in. And then I've got a little plug back behind here that pulls out and plugs in for the fuel pump. And then that's all integrated into the panel as well. So that's pump number 2 out here. So that basically the setup there is it's 23 gallons. When I transfer fuel, I transfer it into the header tank and then allow the header tank to drain into the main. So I'll typically burn like, you know, 10 gallons down on the main and then do like a 10 gallon transfer with the aux tank. And if I do, if I transfer too much, it's just going to be dumping out the vent on it'll overfill and go out the vent. So I have to be careful during those fuel transfers. So I'll usually like set a clock or something. And I do have.
And so what is your total fuel capacity and your best range?
Yeah, so it's about 44 gallons, something like that. Probably 43, if I'm being honest. And then the longest flight I did was the 8-hour one from Seattle to the White Horse Yukon Territory. And that was up at like 12,000 feet most of the way. So fuel consumption was pretty low up there. As far as range goes, let's, well, I guess look that up on ForeFlight, however far that is. But that's the farthest flight I've done. Any more, like, so yeah, the obvious question you're probably asking next is how do you deal with the biological effects of that? So I do have one of those like Barron style relief tubes that I use when I'm on those really long flights, and it vents out the bottom of the airplane. And then because really the airplane's the easier part of that. 8 hours can be a little exhausting. And so like for me, the way I make it work is you got to have like the autopilot is key there. My brain would be zonked if I was hand flying that long in this airplane. And then, yeah, like I said, the relief valve. And so I drink like a Gatorade an hour pretty much, and don't worry about, the typical concerns that you have about drinking too much fluid in an airplane. And then, keep hydrated, keep fueled up. In an airplane of this size to spend that much time. I mean, I don't know how like Dick Rutan and those guys spent 40 hours. It's a little exhausting. So most of the time anymore, Sam, like if I'm going back to Ohio, like unless I'm trying to, do something, like when I was going to Canada or up to Alaska and some of those other trips, it was really helpful because you're going over areas where there isn't good airports to land this airplane, so it really helped out to have that range. And honestly, also before I did the work on the engine, my climb performance was like half of what it is now. And so getting up to like a nice comfortable cruise altitude took a really long time. So if I only had 2 hours range and it took me 20 minutes to get up to a 10,000 foot cruise altitude for the mountains or terrain or whatever I'm flying over, that was a long time. Where if I'm climbing a lot better now, so I a lot of times elect to not use the aux tank anymore. But for a really long trip, it's pretty awesome. Any more questions on that, Sam?
Anybody else? Questions about? I don't have anything here right now. That's really spectacular. I mean, I've got 32 gallons and you're another 10 up above that. And I think my longest flight was about 5 hours and 45 minutes. And you're over 8 hours again. Was that right?
Yeah, right around there.
That's a lot. That's a lot of a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, because I noticed that you really have to, at least for me, maybe I'm a wuss, but for me, I kind of have to you have to exercise your way up to that. You can't just like hop in the airplane and go 8 hours. Like you're like it's fatiguing to be in a little airplane like this for a long time, especially if there's turbulence. And that's the thing. Usually flying out here in like the desert West, you do get a lot of turbulence midday, and that stuff personally, it just takes it out of me. So I guess that's why I said anymore. I don't fly with the aux tank as much, just because I'm down to 160 hours a year, and I don't feel like it's comfortable to sit in the airplane at 8 hours most of the time.
Do you have an autopilot?
Yeah. So it's got. Let me just power up the Avionics here. So.
Now, this is a new system you're showing us now, right?
What's that?
This is a new system, a new panel you're showing us.
Well, yeah. So when I bought the airplane, it had all steam gauges, obviously, because it was built in '86. And then I think in like 2018 was when I put this panel in. And so when I did that, I basically I gutted out, I took everything out, all sports, everything, and then I designed this panel so that it's going to be a little hard. Actually, let me do this. Okay, hopefully that helps out. Okay, so I designed the panel like structurally so that these, like this panel on the side here, there's a seam right here that mounts to the airframe, and then similarly over here, this is mounted to the airframe, and then this whole portion in the middle mounts to that, like secures here, here, and down here. And then everything is connectorized off of the panel, so I can pull this panel out, without, with nothing but a Phillips screwdriver. I can have it out in less than 5 minutes. And so, like I said, everything's connectorized. Like these all are just, on there with these interior panels are all on with like buttons and things. So I personally try to avoid, if I don't need to use a fastener, if I can use like a cool little mechanical means of securing stuff, I try to do that, because I know that if it's a suitable means of securing something, it makes me more likely to go in and inspect or do maintenance that I need to do, versus putting it off for the next flight or something like that. And obviously saves a ton of time. So yeah, I wish I could take the panel off and show you. I mean, I could take it off and show you guys, but I spent a lot of time when I redid this panel. Like I made a full Visio wiring diagram, laid everything out in CAD. So I have everything of the panel in CAD. And like I said, spent a bunch of time doing a wiring diagram, and then all the wires are kind of like routed in a tray right along here. So it's basically, there's 2 plugs down here on this corner, one over here for comm stuff that passes through the tunnel, and then I think there's a GPS antenna over here. But basically, so like I said, that allows me to pull this panel off really quickly and do work, because obviously you all know it's a pain in the butt to reach your head up under here and try and work on anything. And then obviously when I did that, I moved all the controls over to here, so that obviously it's hard to take these types of controls off the panel. And then the one that isn't on here is the fuel valve. So this just runs up to a valve right off on the firewall there. And this guy I designed it so it can slide out that way. But yeah, so the rest of basically all of the avionics and wiring all live on this panel and then get removed. And there's some stuff behind, the panel mounted on the header tank that I can service as well once I remove it. So as far as the panel though, it's a MGL IEFIS Explorer. I can't remember the size of this exactly. And then, so I added this first, and then I added, let's see, I'm gonna go back here. So I added this first, and then I went in and put it in a GTX 320, which is not this transponder, and got the G5 around that same time. So the G5 is my standby, PFD that provides, in my opinion, a more reliable and robust attitude and air data than the MGL. And so I have a standby battery on this. I don't have a standby battery on this. So yeah, basically after I did all that, then I went in and added the autopilot. So it's like you were asking about that, Sam. It's a 2-axis autopilot. I can point out where the servo is.
Okay, you got it.
All right, cool. So yeah, I was saying, so I've got a 2-axis autopilot, and you can see that's the pitch servo right there, and it ties in. Let me grab the flashlight. So yeah, so it's visible, but yeah, so it ties into the system right through the push rods that come from the stick and go into the torque tubes on the elevators. And then the aileron one's pretty similar on the back. It's mounted on that the bulkhead, just like. Okay, I think you might have muted me, Sam. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, cool. Anyway, so that's the autopilot. It's the MGL system, and it works pretty good. Obviously, the quickies are pretty sensitive in pitch, and so sometimes it does a great job in roll. In pitch, it sometimes, I kind of have to keep an eye on it. In climbs and descents, it does a pretty good job, but sometimes it'll oscillate a little bit in pitch, which is really just gets annoying for me. And then honestly, so one thing, if I had to go back and do it again, I would definitely put the Garmin autopilot system in, because I think it's a lot better and it integrates with real avionics better. And so at some point here, I would like to change that to the Garmin autopilot. And same thing, I'd actually really love to put a G3000 in here, or excuse me, G3X in here instead of the MGL. But when I'm feeling like I want to spend 10 grand on that, maybe I'll do it. Anyways, so kind of the last mod I did to the panel was adding the so this is a Garmin GNX 375. So it's their little touchscreen WAS IFR navigator with the transponder built in. So I replaced my transponder with this guy, so I can shoot LPV approaches. I saw a question come up, but I didn't see it, or I didn't get a chance to read it. So Sam, if you want to pass it on.
Yeah, I'll get it. It's about the controls, but go ahead and finish your panel. We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah. So I can shoot RNAV approaches, so LPVs and LNAVs and all that with this. And I try to, the Quickie is not a good IFR platform by any means, but out here we get a lot of marine layers where it's just cloud deck 400 or 500 feet thick. And so for where I live in Orange County, it's really, really nice to have that and be able to punch through those layers. And I think it actually keeps me a little safer because I'm less inclined to go under a layer and more inclined to climb through it and get up, which is safer flying over the city and terrain around here. So that's kind of the basics of the panel. If anybody has system architecture or anything questions, I probably get more into that than most of you all. The only other thing, so here's the controls for the mags.
Person had a question. Since you work at scales or on the Strata launcher on controls, is there any change you would make to the flight controls for this aircraft? Do you think it would be done better?
Yeah, so I mean, and I think I've shared some stuff on the Q list regarding that. So, and this isn't I've like I said, I've worked on flight controls quite a bit, and so for me, there was one point where I went through and looked at everything, and the way you're supposed to, Part 23, the way you're supposed to design flight controls is that you shouldn't have, basically every control should be able to react the maximum pilot effort. So if you have to pick the way you size a control system, like I said, it's max pilot effort. The other way you could size it is, hey, I've got these aero loads that I have to react. But then if you get a jam or something, you could damage them. So I at one point just went through and analyzed all the controls, and really what I found was that there are a lot of areas where things could be more robust. And I think I sent an email out summarizing all of those things. I think the one that actually scare me are really just the elevator linkages, that how the horn is just kind of cantilevered off of it's a single shear horn coming off of that torque tube that runs there. Well,
right,
that guy. It's not every Quickie that's flown has been fine, but you've got a pretty small weld that is not sized to what Part 23 would require you to. And if for some reason that thing cracks or fatigues, it's not the easiest of things to inspect. And if it did crack or fatigue, I'm fairly certain that would be catastrophic, airplane destroyed, you're dead type of situation. And so I know that of all the Quickies flying, that's never happened, but we don't have a lot of cumulative flight hours on the fleet of all these airplanes compared to what it would take to certify an airplane. So that's the one thing that honestly keeps me a little up at night. And I've considered, it'd be really easy to modify it and make it so it's a more robust double shear joint. But yeah, I think that's kind of about it. Most of the stuff is honestly fine. I think there's a couple areas in the controls where I added some extra stiffeners and such on the composite like brackets. But yeah, that's kind of about it. I guess in general, like, and not to down design, but most of the like the Quickie shortcomings in its flight controls, they're not due to the actual signaling systems, like mechanical signaling systems. It's just due to the architecture. It's not like having gigantic elevators on a really short arm like is not good for, you know, a lot, like from a failures standpoint, it's not good for a lot of reasons. And so most of the shortcomings in the flight controls are really just intrinsic to the aircraft's plane form, not actually the signaling.
We've got a question here. Why is the cover on what is the cover on top of the instrument panel?
Oh yeah, so I really should just paint this thing, but so after I designed, or after I added all these you know, fancy displays and such, you realize that you need a glare shield. So I built this glare shield here, and it's not as much for the sun actually, because most of these things do a really good job with sun, but when you're flying at night, you get a ton of reflections up on the canopy. So I designed this glare shield before I had this instrument, and it kind of just like was hanging down just enough to like make it hard to read a little bit of the top in here. And so this is actually just to keep the glare shield, you know, like pushed up a little bit. And like I need to paint that and actually properly install it. But this thing, I haven't had this thing super long time. So
okay, and then on your canopy there, what's the black something up on the front of the canopy?
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. It's a glare shield. So when the canopy's, I can't really do this because I'm not inside the airplane. But when the canopy's down, it just acts as like a glare shield over the panel. That makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, and then I do have the I can't remember what they called it. I think it's a Cougar sunshade. They call these things. So it like, you know, slides up and over, and that's super helpful for being able to, you know, like for being able to get rid of the sun. And then I've got like the original side hinge canopy, and it was actually the sliding one when I bought it, and I just changed that because I wanted, you know, I like it for its simplicity. I do see the advantages of the forward hinge canopy as well. Any other cabin questions?
I'm just taking the questions as they come in. Matt, you mentioned pinch sensitivity. Is it just phugoid oscillations?
Yeah. I mean, that is mostly what it is. So, I mean, yeah, I don't like, this probably isn't the right forum to talk on the aerodynamics of the Quickie and what makes it unique and all that. I think most of you guys are pretty knowledgeable on all that as well. But
hey, Matt, you talked about, I'm gonna kind of jump around. You talked about your trip up to Alaska a little bit, but that was like the culmination of another big trip that you did. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, the 48 state one?
That one. Oh, that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'll talk about that, and I'll kind of show that in the context of the airplane. So, yeah, when I did like the Alaska trip, like I said, I took off from Mojave on a Thursday afternoon, had, you know, 43 gallons of fuel. And I also like, it ended up working out super good. I had the big ox tank here, and then it was kind of works out nice when I have that, because it ends up with all these like kind of little like nooks and crannies I can pack stuff. So I put like food and different things, and I think I had like my tent and some other things shoved up here, and then I had a backpack, you know, back here. So that was like I think it was 12 days in total. So I flew the airplane. It was about a 6-hour leg from Mojave to Bellingham in Washington, and then an 8-hour leg from Bellingham to Whitehorse, Yukon Territory. Got into there at like I think it was 6 p.m. and then I flew over to Anchorage and landed at 10 p.m. there, which was still like middle of the day daylight at that, because it was in the summertime. And then I flew around quite a bit in that kind of area of Alaska. I went to like Seward, Valdez, McCarthy, which is a really cool mountain town down like the Copper River Valley. over to Homer. I went up with some guys and like landed on like up in the Alaska range on a glacial moraine and like camped out there. And then, so didn't take the Quickie obviously for that. And then eventually flew up to Fairbanks, which was like 3 hours, right along Denali, and then up to Fairbanks. And then the kind of like the last big leg of that trip was like the 4-hour flight from Fairbanks up kind of followed the highway up to Dead Horse, Prudhoe, like the Prudhoe Bay up there on the North Shore of Alaska. And then it was like an hour leg from there over to Barrow, Alaska, which, the cool thing about that is it's the northernmost point on the North American continent, like contiguous portion of the continent. But the scary thing is that you're flying over like the tundra for an hour and there's not a single road or anything. So like it's the worst ever spot to have an engine failure, of course.
Yeah.
And I did have let's kind of jump. So there was one point actually halfway into the flight from Seattle to Whitehorse that the engine stumbled, and it was like the worst possible location. Like I had deviated from my course a little bit to save a little bit of time, and I was like in an extremely remote portion of like the Canadian Rockies, I think they're called up there. Like it looked like the surface, it looked like a different planet. If anybody's ever flown like remote portions of Canada, it's like very different from the US. And the engine stumbled a little bit, and I since realized that I think I had some carbon buildups on the valves, and that they actually just were like, I was up at really high at altitude, and I think that the cylinders cooled a little bit, and that caused one of the valves to start to stick a little bit. And everything recovered, and I went down a little bit, and it was fine. But that was pretty horrifying. And yeah, so then after I got back from that, I basically packed up the airplane the same way I did on the Alaska trip. So I had I didn't, because I didn't use the ox tank because those legs were all really short. So I had my backpack, my tent and everything. And then I flew, basically I made this map that allowed me, like a route that allowed me to fly to all the lower 48 states in kind of like the most efficient manner. So I was kind of like just flying along the borders, along like the Gulf Coast states, like the northern borders of the Gulf Coast states, and then up the like western borders of the East Coast states. And I'd like shoot up if I needed to grab central states. And then I stopped in. So I stayed the first night in Page, Arizona, camped out just in a tent there. That's where like Lake Powell is. The second night I stayed at a friend's house in Pensacola. The third night, I was actually in Ohio. So I flew up actually, that's not true. I flew from Pensacola up the East Coast. And the third night was in, not Vermont, one of those states over by New Jersey. And the funny story about that was I was trying to find like strips that were good enough to land a Quickie at, but also like quiet enough that they wouldn't care if you set up a tent next to your airplane. Just because I found after the Alaska trip where I was camping the whole time that you just save so much time being able to camp next to your airplane. I'm doing this trip to fly. I don't really want to hike, find transportation to a hotel, check in a hotel, stay at the hotel, leave early in the morning, try to get back to the airplane. So that really made the trips even more fun. So anyways, so I'm camped out at this airplane or at this little airport on the East Coast. And it turned out it was like a sort of like DOD facility where they overhauled Chinooks. And so like the cops showed up and like asked me what I was doing there, all this stuff. And then it just turned into sort of a funny interaction with the police. And they liked the trip when I told them what I was doing and all that. So anyways, flew from there. I flew up the Hudson Bay corridor through New York City at like 1,000 feet up the Hudson, and then hit up the rest of like the northeast states, and then down over to Ohio where my family was. Stayed there for a few days, and then it was basically it was a half a day to go to Minnesota, and then I had 1 day from Minnesota to Washington, and that was all the lower 48 states. So
Wow.
I kind of
Awesome.
talked through that. Yeah. So I've used this airplane for some like really big trips. And then, like I said, I use it for commuting. So I fly at least once a week. I'll go up to Mojave and back. Like this week it was twice, and I made a stop in Corona. So it flies quite a bit. And obviously, like, my interior is set up to be, it's got pretty like comfortable seats, and I try to keep it like clean and everything. And personally, for me, that, I know it sounds weird to talk about interior, but for me, that makes things a lot more comfortable for an airplane that you're flying all the time. So,
Sure.
yeah, I guess that's kind of all I got on the airplane. Any other questions?
Yes,
Or-
a couple of questions. One is, do you ever carry oxygen? Do you ever have a need for that? And the other one is, have you flown at night very much, and do you have night landings?
Yeah. So I've never flown with oxygen. I think the airplane's pretty lethargic once you get to the altitudes where you need oxygen, and I'm personally comfortable at like 12,000 does not. I don't notice any symptoms of onset of hypoxia there. So I don't carry oxygen just because I don't feel the need for it. The airplane needs oxygen more than I do at those altitudes. And then as far as night, yeah, I've flown a lot at night. When I first got this, I did not fly at night whatsoever. What makes me comfortable flying at night, because I'm not generally, I think, night flying, you got to be careful flying any airplane at night, especially experimental. I kind of like, I don't fly at night unless I'm either, like bouncing, like in glide range of airports or in glide range of a major like lit highway. So I've flown quite a bit between like Vegas and LA because there's a gigantic highway there. I fly my route like up to work and back from work. This time of year, it's always at night. And my route over into work, I've got it mapped out to where like I take off from John Wayne, and then I basically fly like right over LAX at between 8,500 and 9,500 feet, depending on direction, through LA's Bravo, and then up to Mojave from there. So it's not super direct, but what's cool about that is it allows me to, there's a VFR corridor that they let you fly through there. So I'm able to fly through the Bravo at altitude. So I'm in glide range of airports the whole way. So that's like the aspect of like, how do you deal with an engine failure when you don't have good ground visibility. As far as like landing the airplane at night, I don't have a landing light. I have all, like position lights and strobes and all that. But personally, the only reason I think you need a landing light in this airplane is to like spot the coyote on the runway, or if you're landing off field at night. But I find that just using like the runway lights is all the indication I need of altitude and attitude for landing at night. I do give myself, for landing at night in this airplane, I give myself a bit of a buffer on distance. So like the shortest strip I've ever landed at, I think is like 2,000, 2,500 feet, something like somewhere between there. Anytime a strip's below 3,000 feet, I'm like paying more attention to it. And obviously that depends on altitude. And then I would be very hesitant to land at anything shorter than 4,000 feet at night, just because I don't know about you guys, but I personally find that I end up using a little more runway at night. I think I make my smoothest landings at night, but they always seem to eat up a little more runway. So.
Neat. Let's see what else. We haven't seen your tail wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't you show us your tail wheel and tail feathers? And
yeah, so I'm a little embarrassed because I didn't talk about this, but so after I overhauled the engine, I've never really got I haven't been super happy with the Lycon pistons. I don't think that their rings do a phenomenal job of sealing oil. And without going into too much detail, I've got some oil leaks that I've been battling. And so the tail wheels, I haven't painted the tail wheel simply because I've been trying to deal with the oil leaks. And so it's got oil on it, but basically it's this typical API tail wheel. And then I just made this little fairing for it that like bolts on. And I really need to, like I said, finish body working and painting it, but that just hasn't happened. Yeah, and then as far as the tail feathers, nothing too fancy. It's all this typical Q stuff.
is this? I see you have the two cables come out independent of each other. It's not the stock setup. Is there a bell crank or your cable split off in the?
Yeah, I have the little mixing bell crank that's like, right around this, like that location there. And so it ratios the rudder and tail wheel a little bit. I think I did it right, based off of the 6-pack modifications, like the Jim Bob 6-pack or whatever they call that. So yeah, and then there's my tip lights, and there's strobes in those as well. Any other questions on tail wheel stuff?
Pardon me?
Any other questions while we're back here?
I don't know. You have big N numbers on there. I see that. Is that for your international flights?
Yeah, I put them on there for the international. And then just because you got, like, legally, they said you have to have it. And I don't think anybody would actually care if I didn't have them. But they look kind of cool. And if you haven't noticed, the N number is sort of a joke. It looks like booze.
Yeah.
And it was funny because at the time I did that, I never drank any alcohol ever, but I was just trying to find an N number that would be kind of like, memorable and fun. And that was like the only one that I could find available on the FAA's website. But anymore, actually, so that N number 800 Zulu Echo, like I can say it, but try saying that 2 times fast. It's a tongue twister. And so like it actually got super annoying because like ATC would always stumble on it. And I fly with flight following ATC, 100% of the time when I'm out here. And so I actually now have ForeFlight has like if you pay for their highest paid membership, they'll give you like a call sign. So I use ForeFlight 498, which is kind of cool because so I don't use my N number anymore, and I can use that in any airplane. But what's nice about it is it's a little easier to say, and also they don't know, like nobody knows, most controllers don't know what a Q-200 is, Right. And so when they see ForeFlight 498 and an unknown aircraft, like half the time they don't know what I am, and so they like assume that you're like a King Air or something, and they tend to give you a little better treatment, I've found, if you fly with a call sign.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean about call signs that are difficult. Mine's 202 Sierra Hotel, and I got it about 4 times before we get it down.
Yeah, so it's funny. It's really made a big difference having that the ForeFlight 498 one. It's easier for them to recognize. Yeah, and it's this airplane gets a lot of. I mean, you guys all know that they're flying. And whenever you go into new airports, you get a lot of questions, and it's always fun when the controllers get excited about it. So between my N number and the unique airplane, I've had a lot of funny interactions with controllers. The best one was one time I was flying over like Big Bear Lake over to the like northeast of here, and the controller told an airliner, "Hey, you've got a quickie at 6 o'clock," and the guy in the airliners came back with something to the extent of like, "You're talking about an airplane, right?" Like. So yeah, you guys probably had some of those experiences as well, where it gets some laughs. And I don't know about you all, but I've had a lot of times where I'm with a controller, you can tell that they see the type in the card, and they'll like Google it or something, and they'll start. I've had many times where people start asking me questions about the airplane. Like controllers start asking questions just because they like, oh, that's a interesting looking airplane. How much fuel do you burn? This kind of stuff. And one time, actually, when I was flying up that first leg from Mojave to Seattle, you guys will probably like this. So I'm picking up flight following, and this is with Joshua Approach, the approach control that does like Edwards and all that airspace north of LA. And I tell him like, I'm 5 miles north of Mojave heading to Bellingham, Seattle, or Bellingham, Washington. And he goes, "Okay, but where are you, where are your stops in between there?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't have any stops in between." He's like, "Well, yeah, but what airports are you going to be going to? I'm like, well, I'm probably going to overfly these airports. But it took like 5 interchanges before he realized that I was saying that, like, no, I have enough fuel in this little goofy airplane to fly all the way to Bellingham, and I'm not stopping at all. And then we started talking, and I'm like, yeah, I'm actually, planning this trip. I'm gonna go up to Seattle, because he asked me, like, wow, what are you doing going all the way up to Seattle and nonstop? And I told him, like, oh, I'm trying to go to Bear, Alaska, and all this. And so then, like, 5 months later, after coming back from this trip, I'm flying down to Orange County from Mojave, and I'm like, right, like, over the San Gabriel Mountains north of LA there, like, getting ready to get handed off to SoCal Approach. And this controller goes, hey, did you, like, before I let you go, 800 Zulu Echo, did you make it to Barrow? And I didn't catch what he said at first, but then eventually I realized it was the controller that I had talked to like 6 months prior, and he was just trying to figure it out if I'd ever made it up to Barrow. So that was super fun.
You're famous.
Yeah. And the funny thing too is, it's probably any airplane, but especially this one, because it's recognizable. But because I fly so much between that's the same two airports, that you start to recognize controllers a lot. And half the time I don't even have to, like, I can just call up Approach and with my N number, and they say, okay, you're going to John Wayne, Hollywood Park Route 9500. Yep. And that's all I have to say. So there's some benefits of flying an unreasonable amount.
Okay, terrific stories. We got a couple of questions up here. One is about density altitude. How does that affect your performance? And we also want to know what your tail spring is made out of.
Yeah. So, okay, density altitude. I flew out of, I was based out of Tehachapi for the first 2 years I was out here, and that's a 4,000 foot strip. I'm gonna turn this off so I don't kill the battery too much. So that's a 4,000 foot strip at 4,000 feet, and the airplane was totally fine up there. I've taken off at gross up there, and I do, like, at 4,000 feet, I can cruise at like 100 knots, or I can climb at like 100 knots and like 800 to 900 feet a minute pretty comfortably at that altitude. And then takeoff roll is, if I'm light, certainly less than 2,000 feet. If I'm heavy, it's probably more like 2,000, 2,500. And then the highest density altitude I've taken off at, probably up in at the Grand Canyon, which I think that field's somewhere around like 6,500. I've also done Big Bear, which is right around 6,000 as well. And I mean, yeah, I don't have exact numbers. You definitely notice it.
Yeah. What's your on your big flights when you had your aux tank and everything? What was your what'd you weigh out at? Gross weight.
Yeah, let's see here. I'll do some mental math here. I think it's, right around like the 1,300 pounds.
Uh-huh.
Right around there. I do, I notice, like, I've noticed the airplane likes, like, if my CG starts to go more aft, it obviously, as you expect, it's a little more unstable. And so this, like, weight and balance wise on this airplane, I like having the aux fuel up here versus where you've got it behind the seat, Sam, because it helps out with weight and balance. And I actually do, like, I'll try, like, if I've got the full aux tank and like my backpack and camping gear and stuff, I'll intentionally transfer fuel out of the aux to get it into the main tank as fast as I can, because it once again kind of helps out with stability, and the autopilot gets a little happier. But yeah, when I'm on those long trips, like the baggage compartment is like fully packed out, more or less, the aux tank, and then stuff up here. And so 20 gallons, 6 gallons, it's probably like, and then I think I weighed all my gear, and it was like 30 pounds. So the aux tank and all the gear really adds probably 150 pounds. Yeah. So it's really just like flying with a passenger. Okay, so tail spring. The tail spring is it's a carbon fiber 5/8 inch pultruded rod, and then I wrapped I think 8 plies of fiberglass around it to take the torsion that goes into there. So those plies are at 45. Like they're not they're 45 against the axis of the rod.
Where did you get the pultruded carbon fiber?
Yeah, there's a company actually in Tehachapi called I think it's called the composite store, or the composite store, or something like that. It's like TCS or something. It's like an acronym of 3 letters. One of them is composite. I can look it up and send it to you guys, but they're actually a really good resource if you need hardware like that, because they have loads of like pultruded rods, tubes, like lots of prefabricated fiberglass and composite shapes. And then they also have, and carbon shapes. And they also have like a lot of, they all have like, a way broader selection of supplies for working with composites than like aircraft spruce or, whoever. They've got like a lot of different, they sell West Systems resins, but they also sell like ProSet and all the other, like, I think they sell Magnolia and some of the other like more high performing resin systems. But they also have, like peel ply and, all the various like plastics and cores and all that stuff too.
Okay. We got a question about maneuvering, G loads. Do you ever do any aerobatics?
No.
Any high G stuff at all?
No, I mean, I haven't pulled more than like 2 or 3 Gs in here. Like, and that's obviously like just kind of having fun, yanking and banking. But no, I don't do, like, I'm sure this airplane rolls just great. I know some people that on the group have. I haven't, like, I've got 1,800 hours. I actually have never rolled an airplane, which is kind of embarrassing. And this is not a good airplane to learn in aerobatics. So I haven't done anything like real high Gs or any real aerobatic stuff.
It took me quite a while to get a nerve to do a roll. Then I finally figured out, just raise up the nose a little bit and shove the stick all the way to the left and just leave everything alone until you're right side up again.
Yeah. And I know it's that easy. It's just like, I've read the accident report of the guy in the Baron who like did that and ended up overspeeding the airplane and killing himself. And it's like, I don't like I said, it's just, to me, it's like this, like I've not bashing anybody that wants to have fun in their quickie. Like I've like fully transitioned to, like we talked about landing in dirt strips and stuff. I don't know if I would do that again anymore. I've gotten a little more conservative just because like, and actually like I land another cool story. There's a strip called Amboy that's out off of Route 66. Like, it's somewhere between Vegas and LA. And it's there's like a 30-foot wide dirt strip. It's like 3,000 feet long. And my friend does a fly-in out there every year, and it's pretty cool because it's like this old, like, abandoned kind of ghost town looking place right on Route 66. So you can land at the airport, and then like I've got a picture of my airplane sitting on Route 66 over the big like Route 66 painting in the asphalt there. So it's kind of cool. But what I'm saying is, like, that was like probably the sketchiest strip I've ever landed this thing at in terms of like landing on dirt, not having a lot of width. And anymore, like if this airplane, if my airplane is, broken or something's broken, it means I'm having to drive, 3 hours each way through LA traffic versus flying 45 minutes over the city into work. And it's like a beautiful, super comfortable flight. So like, I really try to avoid doing anything that could in any way damage the airplane or take it down. Cause I obviously, I have to temper that with like, you don't want to, if something's not safe to fly, you're not flying. But I've been able to, because I spent a long time like working on the airplane and flying it when I didn't need to fly it. I've gotten to a point where it's very reliable. Like I haven't driven my car up to Mojave since like May of 2021, and I've been to work, multiple times a week in that time period, so this airplane is like more than anything, I think the most unique thing about it is that it's actually shockingly reliable compared to certified airplanes, certainly.
Well, Matt, we are just about out of time here. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No, although I saw there was one question, but how much time do we have, Sam?
We got a minute and a half.
Okay. Well, there's a question about how to access camping gear. Real quick, I guess I can just answer that and then get to the conclusion stuff. But yeah, so there's enough room up here that I can access. I can't get to anything through here, but I can reach like through here and get to stuff. So that's, yeah, it's actually pretty easy, but I can't really access much in flight. So yeah, I think that was the last question. And then, yeah, I guess just generally, yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed checking out my airplane. And
Yeah, it's been following you, fun following you the last couple of years since I met you at Oshkosh, and
yeah,
it's been pretty swell. You've really added a lot of enthusiasm and energy into our little world here.
good. Yeah, and I apologize. It's taken me so long to do this tour. Like Sam's been bugging me quite a bit to do it, and we said at the beginning, it's a little tricky because I've got a nice hangar up in Mojave, but I don't have anything in Orange County, and so Saturday mornings a little tricky. And with my work schedule, it can be a little hard to plan stuff. So yeah, my apologies. I haven't done it sooner, but hopefully you guys enjoyed it.
Okay, we are out of time. Thanks everybody for attending. And it'll take me a few days to get this uploaded to YouTube. I'm not going to be around for the next couple of days, so a little bit. But thanks very much.
Matthew.
Okay, thanks. Talk to y'all later.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.